I do think that there's just going to be a re-emphasis on what we were talking about earlier, these softer skills. I see it with my students. They have never before has a sort of class of law students have had this access to brilliance so readily available. And then the challenge becomes, okay, get on your feet and talk to opposing counsel or make a phone call. What is it like to talk to a judge, make an argument? How do you make a jury feel certain things? Those skills, I think they're really difficult to quantify, but it's one of those things that you know it when you hear it or you know it when you see it. And if you can make someone feel, if you can take all of these things, all of this information you have access to and make people feel, then I actually think that where we're going, that is the prize, that's going to be the gold.
Welcome to Between the Briefs, a podcast by Steno. We're here to bring you practical tips, expert insights, and real conversations about the pretrial process, court reporting, and the legal technology shaping the future of litigation. I'm your host, Adrian Cea.
And I'm your host, Joe Stevens. Whether you're an attorney, paralegal, or just curious about how technology is changing the legal industry, we've got something for you. Each episode will break down complex topics, share behind-the-scenes intel, and talk to the people leading innovation in and out of the courtroom. So grab a coffee and let's get into what's happening between the briefs.
Welcome back to Between the Briefs, the podcast where law and technology meet. I'm your host, Adrian Cea, and today we have a very special bonus episode that's going to change how you think about your legal practice. We're diving right into Steno's brand new attorney work styles framework, a groundbreaking assessment that reveals 4 distinct archetypes and how they best approach the law. Joining me are 3 brilliant legal minds. We have Dylan Ruga, Steno's co-founder and chief legal officer, who's also a founding member of Stalwart Law Group, one of California's top litigation boutiques. Carly Savar, Steno's general counsel, who brings unique insights on how different work styles impact legal teams. And lastly, Joe Stevens, our legal solutions consultant and the mastermind behind the framework, who built one of Texas' largest public defender offices and now teaches Texas tech law. Now, before we dive in, be sure to take the quiz so you know your attorney work style. We're going to go ahead and put the link in the description of this episode, and you can discover if you're a research commander, strategic architect, courtroom dynamo, or a narrative weaver. Now, Joe, let's kick this off. Walk us through these attorney work styles. What are they, and why do they matter?
Yeah, Adrian, so it's interesting because they've sort of carved out 4 different approaches, I suppose, that different attorneys could really sort of lean into, the different primary features of different practitioners. And it's really interesting thought exercise, right? It's kind of got like a Myers-Briggs component to it, the different features that really make an attorney tick. So if we go through them sort of one by one, you've got the research commander who is really sort of thinking more strategically, like buried in precedent, buried in background information. Obviously, case law comes to mind, making sure that everything is buttoned up on the research front, fully prepared for whatever you're walking into. The strategic architect is more like a puppet master in a way, like the person who is orchestrating the strategy, really, really, really trying to understand where things are in the life cycle of a case, and then coordinating all of the components that tactically take things brilliantly from point A to the finish. Your courtroom dynamo is more of, this might be more theatrical, right? Not artificially so, but someone who is public facing, someone who's on their feet a lot, taking all of the prep work that maybe someone like a research commander would have done, and then executing brilliantly on the fly in the courtroom, quick on their feet, quick decision makers, thriving under pressure in the moment. And then lastly, we have, I think, the narrative weaver, which is the storyteller, right? The person who kind of takes some of these things, where we are in the life cycle of the case, what arguments we're trying to make, what needs to be said and to whom, and then is really crafting the most appropriate, best, most compelling story around that.
Love it. That was a great breakdown. Thank you so much for that. Now, I want to flow right into this with a little bit of a different take here. I want to ask each of you, tell me a fun fact about yourself, and then tell me what archetype you think you are. And then we'll flow later into the conversation about when you took the quiz and what it actually came up as a result. So, Carly, I'm going to start with you. Tell the audience about yourself, and go from there.
All right. I am Carly Savar. I am the general counsel of Steno. A fun fact about me. A couple fun facts. I love food and wine. And back in my prior life, I started a wine company with some friends after I graduated law school. I was not that was not the job for me. So I went the boring route and became a lawyer. But I do love wine. My husband and I make ice cream, and that is, become our hobby one day. Maybe it'll be more than that. In terms of when I looked at the quiz, I would aspire to be, if I thought of myself as a practicing lawyer back in my earlier days, I would have loved to be a courtroom dynamo. That's, why I got into the law and what I always wanted to be. That is not what I am today. But if you asked me which of the archetypes I wanted to be, and which I aspired to, the younger self was attracted to law because of the drama. So yeah, I would have said, oh, I'm going to be a courtroom dynamo.
Love it. And Dylan, how about yourself?
So hi, I'm Dylan. I am the president and chief legal officer here at Steno. Let's see, fun fact about me is I am a rabid 49ers fan. You can see kind of photo over here behind my shoulder. That's my son and me at the Super Bowl a couple years ago. Unfortunately, the Niners lost in overtime, but it was quite an experience. And also, I actually played football, varsity football and varsity baseball in college. So two-sport college athlete, and most people don't know that about me. When I think like Carly, when I went to law school and when I graduated law school, I kind of pictured myself as a courtroom dynamo, being in front of a jury and making the most kind of compelling arguments possible, probably as a result of watching a lot of TV and movies as a youngster that influenced me. But over time, I think that's kind of evolved. And so now I kind of think of myself more as a strategic architect.
Amazing. And Joe?
Hi, everyone. Joe Stevens. I am a consulting attorney with Steno. I also teach law at Texas Tech School of Law. It's the only law school in the country that has a public defender office inside it. So I get to teach actual trial skills through the clinic there. And I'm in court all the time. So I guess a fun fact before I go into the archetype, fun fact would be, in an earlier life, I had competed in 11 full Ironman triathlons. So that was a different phase of my existence, but something I'm pretty proud of. I think if I had to sort of sum up what I thought I would be, it was more of the strategic commander. It was that person who was really like orchestrating a lot from just start to finish of a case. My mind sort of works strategically that way, and bringing the right people together very often who have like better skill sets than I do in certain areas. That was always a strength that I saw myself as having.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So it sounds like there's quite a diverse selection here. And just seeing the quiz, I can totally relate to, Carly and Dylan here when they're saying, I was watching the movies. I remember my cousin Vinny. I'm thinking, man, that would be so badass to just be in the courtroom and just show up the judge and everyone being like, this is what it is, and get that spotlight. But it's not actually how it goes all the time, as we all know. And after interviewing countless people in between the briefs, the law is much more diverse than just that. So what I want to dig into right now are just some scenarios. And I would like to ask each of you what you think it is. So we're going to play a little game here called Spot the Style. I'm going to name a scenario, and I'd like each of you to just mention what archetype you think it is and why. We'll have a little bit of a discussion. So, Carly, I'm going to start with you.
All right.
Now, the scenario I have is I color code my entire calendar and have backup plans for my backup plans. What archetype am I?
Oof. Well, you're not the fly by the seat of your pants archetype, that's for sure. So I'm going to veto Courtroom Dynamo. I don't think that is right. You are either the research commander or strategic architect. I'm going to say strategic architect for that one, because you are, thinking very critically and mapping things out. So that's what I'm going to go with.
Sense? Okay. And that is the strategic architect. And Dylan, this one is going to go to you. If we can settle this in the hallway before trial, that's a win for me.
I got to imagine that's the courtroom dynamo, who's always thinking on their feet and trying to get things done kind of by the seat of their pants and kind of on the fly.
Now, have you seen when people are practicing law, like that's actually realistic? Like it's actually hallroom deals that are happening right before you get into the hallway, into the courtroom, and next thing you know, you have a settlement or some kind of resolution?
All the time. We see it happening right after we finish picking a jury, sometimes while we're picking a jury, sometimes after we put on the case and the jury, or waiting for the verdict from the jury, we'll reach a settlement during that time. So happens all the time.
Yeah, I think we can all say probably Dylan, Joe, and I have seen that all the time. That's how law works.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing like the pressure of. There's something incredibly unique about taking a case and bringing it into a courthouse and making everyone feel that pressure that just changes the way that people communicate about it and negotiate about it.
It's funny that you mentioned that because one thing we've seen in between the briefs when we've interviewed tons of lawyers and we ask this question, it's about soft skills. And it's like, how good are you at certain soft skills? Do you think being a courtroom dynamo, soft skills matter a lot? And Dylan, I would love your take on this. What have you seen either new attorneys or older attorneys master that kind of fit into that archetype of courtroom dynamo when it comes to soft skills?
Well, it's really just being able to read the room and realize that you got to present your case in a way that resonates with the jury or the judge, whoever you're presenting it to. What that means is not being so formulaic and robotic and reading your opening statement from a script or your closing argument from a script. You definitely don't want to do that. And so it's about just being nimble and reading the room and being able to deliver your arguments persuasively based on the feedback that you're getting from the room itself.
Okay, I like it. It's a good piece of advice. And now, Joe, I have a scenario for you. My opposing counsel just cited a case from 1973. Hold my beer while I find these earlier cases that completely contradict it.
We've got to go with research commander there. This is a person who is buried in the case law world and would be sort of chomping at the bit to try and track down that precedent.
All right. I like it. You guys have all answered correctly thus far. Got to make these a little bit more challenging. So, Carly, I actually want to know from you. I want to hear from a personal experience. What scenario may come to mind or thought process that you have had in the past where you've worked with someone and you really immediately realize they're a totally different style than you, just based on the way that you work?
Oh, well, I can think of one of my old bosses. He was definitely, and I learned a lot from him. He was probably a narrative weaver. He cared a lot about the story, and that's what he focused on. And I would tell him, and I've gravitated towards that, but I kept pushing him. We need law to back this story up. You can't just have a story. You need to say it. And so there was always that push and pull between he wanted to make something up, and that was great. And sometimes, you need backup. You can't have a story. A story is really important, but without some tethering to the case law, it's not enough. And there was always that push and pull of how much story, how much case law, and he and I would go back and forth. But I think he made me a better storyteller. I think we can get to this, but I think I lean that way now. But that was something that we, especially in my earlier years, definitely collided on.
All right, that narrative weaver, working with that style. And Dylan, I want to ask you the same question, but a little differently. You have founded Steno, and I'm sure you have been to countless, investor pitches, and you got to build a cohesive story. How has that trait made you either a better lawyer or an overall better professional?
Yeah, so being a narrative weaver is not my inherent strength. And so, in fact, as I think through these different archetypes, I do think I shifted and evolved from kind of before law school. I was probably this courtroom dynamo, and like I envisioned myself being a courtroom dynamo and, being that guy in the courtroom. And then as I was a junior associate and kind of working my way up through the ranks, I was probably more of a research commander and relying just kind of heavily on the case law and just trying to learn and absorb kind of what that case law was and really try to differentiate based on my ability to find the relevant cases that would control the outcome. And then later in my career, kind of moved more into kind of strategic architect, where I already have a general sense of what the case law is, and so now I'm trying to kind of develop the strategy with my knowledge of the case law, helping to guide what that strategy may or may not be. The narrative weaver is something that hasn't kind of fit in the arc of my career so far, and it's something that is really important. And you're right, when you're pitching investors or presenting arguments to a jury or writing a brief or whatever it is, the narrative is really important. Because not only do people remember facts better when they're presented like in the form of a story, but also whenever you're presenting a case, no matter what kind of case it is, people want to side with whichever side they believe was treated unjustly for one reason or another. And so a large part of what our job is as lawyers is to convince whoever is the judge or the jury that it's our side that deserves our sympathy, or our side that was wronged in some way. And as a result, the court or jury should rule in our favor. So that narrative component is a key piece that I think all lawyers really need to focus on, myself included.
Okay. And Joe, I have a question for you. You have done countless interviews with me on Between the Briefs. What archetype do you think a lot of the lawyers we interview actually fall into?
I think that there's probably, at their most brilliant, the more strategic minded approach like that. I think that strategic architect is probably where their brilliance comes in, because there's a couple of things that I think fall into that are really interesting. One is that if you occupy that headspace, I think you're really good at recognizing the thing that you're not primarily skilled at. So you understand your own strength, and your own strength might be finding someone who is stronger than you in a certain area. And I think there's a humility there that I think is really powerful and leads to a lot of success. But when we talk to people on the podcast, and when we actually really interview them and see where their success has come from, very often I think it's come from a moment where they really felt as though it was their strength and their strength alone that was going to drive forward this, the positive outcome, whatever that might be, whatever they were trying to accomplish. But then they realized that it actually needed to be supplemented by someone else's skill set. So that to me feels really strategic. And that seems to be a really prominent theme of the people that we've had on.
Okay. I think this is a perfect segue to just touch on the archetypes that we actually got after taking the quiz. Now, Carly, tell me about your archetype. Reveal it. What is it, and why do you think it suits you?
Yeah, I think it was pretty right on. And it's funny, what you didn't ask us is, who we would have thought each one of us fit into, because I have been thinking about it. I do agree that if I had to choose for Dylan, I would say the strategic architect fits him well. I have seen Dylan put together cases and mastermind a strategy, and I think he's great at that. So that's what I would have chosen for Dylan. Joe, I haven't seen as much, but I would guess, based on everything I've heard and seen from Joe, that he would be a courtroom dynamo. So if I had to guess for Joe, that's what I would have chosen. For me, what I got was the narrative weaver, and that does suit me. I mean, like I said in my earlier days, I think I would have fallen into more of the research commander. I have moved away from that, because what I realize, and especially it suits me well, I think, for my in-house days, a lot of times the law is important. We need to know the law, and that matters. But common sense often rules the day, and people need, to Dylan's point, it really helps if there's a story, there's a message, people care about what you're saying. And that's the same with a company. I can tell people at Steno what the law is, but I get a much better result if I tell people why it matters, why it's important, why they should care about something. And that's much more important than citing a statute to people. And so I have learned in my career that I get the results that I want better if I can tell a compelling story and I can, get people to see something my way. And
Love it. Yeah. That speaks a lot to influence. It's almost like a quiet influence, right? When you understand how to build a story and you're able to change people's minds just by kind of bringing up the facts and telling the story that's going to matter to them. Have you seen that be one of the, a massive strength in your career so far?
I have. You know, just in terms of my practice also, I got better results in front of judges, you know, when I focused more on the common sense arguments and, you know, of course, having case law to bolster that, but focusing more on why something matters, why, you know, the story is compelling. That has gotten me much farther than just trying to find the perfect precedent.
Makes complete sense. And Dylan, how about yourself? When you took the quiz, what was your archetype?
Well, as Carly guessed, I'm a strategic architect.
Awesome. Tell me more about that. Did you find the results were actually surprising, or were they pretty spot on with the way you work?
You know, I'd say it's pretty spot on. I'd say, as I mentioned before, that my archetype has probably evolved or changed over the course of my career. I'd say, you know, about 10 years ago, I switched from the defense side to the plaintiff side. And I think that switch from being a defense lawyer to a plaintiff's lawyer kind of caused me to be a bit more strategic. I think plaintiff lawyers generally are a bit more entrepreneurial and need to kind of think 3 or 4 steps ahead in terms of strategy. And so I think that switch kind of helped me kind of evolve, as well as obviously founding Steno and building a company and navigating all the complexities that come with you know, starting a company and everything that comes along with that has caused me to be just more strategic in nature. So I'd say those 2 things that have happened in my career in the last 10 years have caused me to be more of a strategic architect than previously, when I probably would have been more of a research commander.
Got it. And now, when you were one of the founding members of Stalwart Group, your co-founders, would you say they're also in the same archetype as you or different?
So I have a partner at Stalwart, and he's definitely strategic, but he is a much better kind of narrative weaver than I am, and he can you know, tell the story of anything and convince you that he can convince you to buy ice in a snowstorm kind of thing. You know what I mean? He's just very compelling with the way that he pitches you know, different concepts and cases. So you know, I think that he and I complement each other well in that regard.
Love it. And Joe, how about yourself? Tell us about your quiz results. What did you get? Were you surprised?
Well, Carly nailed this one as well. So Courtroom Dynamo was it. And I wrestled with this one actually a little bit because I think maybe the shadow side of Courtroom Dynamo probably suggests some sort of ego when it comes to sort of being on your feet and being the person that focus, making the argument. And there's some truth to that. But I also think that a critical piece of this side, I am in court a tremendous amount, but a big piece of being, I think, dynamic in court is also knowing what not to say and knowing when to be silent and knowing when enough is enough and when you can shift from, you know, getting a witness to say a certain thing to actually sort of stating something for argument down the road. So there's just a whole different skill set that goes along with that. Someone once described being in trial to me is, you know, having to make a decision, a pretty important decision every 10, 15, 20 seconds all day for as long as the trial goes on. And there's a fatigue to that I think doesn't exist anywhere else, or it doesn't feel like, for me, it's existed anywhere else in the profession. So it resonates because I am in court a lot, and I'm perpetually making arguments and trying to accomplish things that way. But I do think that there's a side of it that doesn't necessarily feel completely like my personality, but it's a large umbrella too, right? Like there's a lot of things that go into that one persona.
Okay, I love it. Now, I would love to touch on what may be the downsides of your personas, because we've all been talking about the great things. You could weave a story, you could be great in the courtroom, but what do you think where you might fall short when you fall into a specific personality type? Carly, let's start with yours. What do you feel would be one of the downsides of your archetype?
Of the narrative weaver, a downside of it, I mean, sometimes you get too set on the story and you get in love with your own story sometimes, and it may be hard to, you know, challenged with, you know, different facts, new opportunities, kind of recalibrate the story fast enough to try to maintain that emotion, maintain, you know, your integrity in the story while trying to, you know, handle these maybe bad facts on the side that, you know, didn't quite fit into this narrative that you've created. And so I think I don't know if I just answered the question, but I think that is the hard part of being a narrative weaver, is maybe you don't have that, think fast on your feet and adapt like some of the other narratives have.
That's a great point. Dylan, would you agree that might be a fault that could happen?
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
Nice. And how about yourself? When it comes to any type of archetype, or yours in particular, do you feel like there's any downsides to being in your archetype?
Sure. I mean, being a strategic architect is great if everything works out the way that you hope it'll work out, but it never does. And so you need to be able to pivot, and being able to pivot, I think leans pretty heavily on being kind of this courtroom dynamo that's able to think on your feet and kind of quickly kind of change course depending on kind of what's coming at you. So again, if you're too much of a strategic architect, then you're kind of locked into your ways and unable to kind of adapt as necessary as different things kind of come up that maybe were unexpected.
All right. And Joe, when you're a courtroom dynamo, I feel like a big part of this is the confidence, right? You're like, I'm going to go into court and I'm going to crush it. And sometimes that itself can be not in the best light because you might not crush it. So tell me, what other downsides have you seen are part of that archetype?
I think there's a few. I mean, I think that there's a sense sometimes you can lean less into the preparation because you feel like you can execute more strongly in court and you don't need to do all the work because, once you're there on your feet and you're just rolling, that you're sort of doing the work then and there. And I think that can be a misstep. But I do know a bunch of trial lawyers who sort of pride themselves on, getting a file and trying a case pretty quick. And you can skip out or overlook a lot of strategy in that moment. I think another thing is that you can sometimes get in this space where you're really convinced that words will get you out of everything, and not necessarily get you out of everything, but allow you to sort of navigate things that had you taken a step back or had you sort of been a little bit more prepared on the front end, you wouldn't have to be sort of talking your way through so much in the courtroom setting. So it can just vary. I knowing your audience in a courtroom setting, as Dylan just sort of talked about earlier, like having an understanding of who you're presenting to and why and what's going to resonate with them, that's the brilliance of the courtroom dynamo. Someone who does that well knows how to tailor exactly what's living inside their head and may have been living inside their head for a few years, right, before you get into that setting, and really knows how to tailor it brilliantly. But without that legwork behind the scenes, the courtroom dynamo can sometimes come across as inauthentic.
Makes complete sense. Now, Joe, if you had a question maybe for Carly around the archetype, her career, whatever it might be, what would you ask so that you can find out more about who they are and understand how to work with them?
Yeah, so this is a good question. If I was going to ask Carly a question, I guess my question for Carly would be, what of these four would be the one that you would most feel like would supplement your skill set the most? In other words, who would be most beneficial for you to be working with to maybe complete some of the, I'm not trying to say weaknesses because I haven't really seen any weaknesses in you, Carly, but like the things that maybe that you would like to improve upon, or you wish someone who was a right-hand person for you had that skill set.
The strategic architect is somebody that I wish I had to supplement me. I mean, that whole color coding and staying organized and, backup to backup is by nature not me. I have to fight hard to stay organized and color code. And it was a joke in my first law firm. I had one of the messiest desks of any lawyer. And when I went out of town, there were two paralegals who organized my desk into nice piles. And it was so nice of them. And I still remember that. And it was great. But that is, again, by nature, I'm going to see something and throw in and, not stay focused and organized and think through each step I'll think through the steps, but to keep me focused and on track and make sure that we're attacking each different facet of a case is something that I could use. So that would be a compliment to me.
Got it. And Dylan, this question is going to be aside from archetypes. And I want to know, law is multifaceted. We can talk about archetypes and how they fit together and work together, and it can provide a benefit for you. But at the end of the day, the law doesn't always work in that box. So what has your experience told you what it takes to be a good lawyer? What do you feel that you need to encompass in order to be successful in the law?
It's really a combination of all of the things that we've been talking about today, and it's not one or the other or two or three of them. It's really having the right balance of all of them. I'd say, what I've learned to be kind of the least helpful type of lawyer is, I've had some associates that have worked with me in the past who will review a file and come tell me all the reasons that we're going to lose a case. And that is just super not helpful at all. And those people may just be, kind of only research commanders and only looking at the law and thinking only, hey, listen, the law's not on our side on this. And that may be true, and every case is going to have some difficulties or challenges to get past. But it's our job as lawyers to kind of think strategically and become the strategic architect and the narrative weaver and figure out how to use the facts that we have to make a compelling argument why maybe that law that the associate is relying on maybe doesn't apply completely, or maybe why there's arguments around why the law should be different, or another way to come up with creative arguments, which is really our job as lawyers, rather than thinking kind of a black or white kind of approach that's just binary, we win or lose, and we're going to lose this case and there's nothing we can do about it. So I'd say, to answer your question, Adrian, it's really it's a smattering of each of the archetypes that we've looked at here, written as the best type of lawyer.
Do that just encompasses all of it, and you're able to take advantage of each trait that is in each one to your advantage when it comes to your role. And Joe, from what you've experienced yourself, do you agree with what Dylan said? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would. I mean, that's the joy of an exercise like this, is realizing that each of these has their sort of really strong features, and then they have their shadow side, and then the right combination. I mean, Carly is not just one in one box. Or Dylan is the same, right? Like, his strength may be one, but then has some skills in other aspects as well. I think that the only other thing that I would say to tack onto that is, if you feel sort of misidentified by it, or if you feel like you are trying to be a voice that you're actually not, in other words, if you think that the attractive thing to be is a courtroom dynamo, but you're actually way better at something else, you can make steps in that direction, and maybe you ultimately can really become that persona. But I think it's really important at different phases of your career to really listen to how you what your own voice is and what your skill set actually is, and really embrace that, right? I mean, you can't force, there's no way that I could ever be a research commander of any real strength, in my opinion. I mean, I think I know how to do it. I understand the importance of it, but there are better minds at that than me. So I think that the understanding of where you can actually personally sort of excel and grow, and also understand your limits too, I think that's a critical piece to really being a wonderful lawyer too.
All right. And Carly, when it comes to being general counsel, right? You're general counsel here at Steno. How does knowing your archetype help with your position? And I know you're looking to scale your team at some point in the future.
No.
Why is it important to know other attorneys' work styles so that you can better work with them?
Yeah, I mean, twofold, and I kind of touched on it earlier. I think, being able to tell a story is very useful as a general counsel. A lot of my day is talking with teams and answering questions about, can we do this? Can we do this? What should we be doing? And so it's very important for me that everyone understands the why we do what we do. Without that, we don't get as good results, and people don't remember, what we should be doing. So making sure that the message sticks, it's important to have a good story behind it. And it's important that it, gets in there and resonates. In terms of hiring, yes, I am hiring now, hiring a regulatory person, a regulatory attorney. I'm very excited about having that hire being posted. Certainly, telling the story about why Steno is important, and that is important. That is something that I am doing. What I am looking for in that person is more of that, like I said, to complement me, that strategic architect, somebody who can take the rules, stay organized, gather our thoughts, make sure that we are staying current, making sure we are staying organized, all of the things that I don't have as much time to do and dive in. That is what I am looking for this person to supplement. I don't need, they do need to be able to explain and articulate rules to our teams and on a, in a common sense, understandable, digestible way. And that is something that, is important. So that story, again, ties in. They need to know all of these archetypes, archetypes are relevant. What I really need from this person is somebody who's going to help us take the structure to the next level and make sure that, it's not just a story that we're telling to the teams about what rules are and what they're not, but making sure that it's in a structured place so we can find them and everybody can know them and understand them.
That makes complete sense. And I think it's going to help grow your team very successfully.
Yeah.
Dylan, in the past, when you've worked on different cases, have you ever had a situation where you just have conflicting opinions with another attorney you're working with, and it's most likely due to just the way you view things, or they're a different archetype or different way of handling it?
Yeah, I'd say that comes up probably most often when we get to the part of the case where we're talking about whether to try to resolve it by way of settlement or not. And people have different feelings about whether a case should be settled and at what value, based on their different archetypes, right? So some people are, for example, the Courtroom Dynamo may want to take the flyer, and it just feels good about being able to present this case in front of a jury and swing for the home run and see what happens. Other people are just much more kind of conservative in nature. That's probably more of like the research commander, maybe isn't comfortable taking as much risk and wants to sees the potential flaws in the case and wants to get the case resolved for a reasonable amount, or rather hit a single or a double on this case and not try to swing for the fences. And so I'd say really it's at that point where the kind of conflicting personalities and archetypes come out the most.
Okay. And Joe, have you ever had a situation where maybe the person wasn't even an attorney, let's say it was a client, because I think this is a big part of this, but they are almost like a different personality than you, and you view things in your own attorney archetype. How do you deal with that conflicting in the client attorney relationship, where they just have a whole different viewpoint on opinion than what your recommendation might be?
Yeah, I mean, that could be foundationally sort of ruinous, right? I mean, depending on the level of difference, at some point you are the person that they are coming to, they're coming to for strategy. They're coming to because you've achieved certain results. Like, they're coming to you because you know your way through this process. You've demonstrated you know your way through this process, and if they have other ideas, that can be terribly conflicting to the attorney-client relationship. So ideally, that's vetted really, really, really early, and the decision would be made sort of in the earliest days, whether or not to even sort of engage with a client who just didn't see eye to eye with you. I mean, there's probably another lawyer out there for them, and maybe that's a better fit. A different angle to your question that I'm actually really interested in too, though, is just because there's a difference of opinions, sometimes that can actually be really useful, right? I mean, I think we've all had a situation where you get so close to the facts of the case and so close to the procedure, and you get so close to this sort of strategic legal thinking, and you're surrounded by people who are speaking the same language, and maybe there's a difference of opinion. But at some point you do have to do what Carly's talking about. You have to craft it into a story and be able to tell that story. And sometimes the most help is actually having people who are outside, or who have different opinions, or who are going to sort of listen to what has been living in your head for so long and tell you that it doesn't actually make as much sense as you think it does. So having that difference of opinion, I think, can be really fruitful. And I think it's really important sometimes for lawyers to seek that out, just making sure that there is someone out there, checking you and making sure that what you're saying, what you're thinking actually is coming through the way you think it is. appellate lawyers are really good at this. You know, when they're mocking their arguments before an appellate court, they're really wanting to make sure that they're pressure tested. I think trial lawyers can be good at it when it comes to witness prep and putting their witness in front of a mock jury to see how well they actually testify and hold up. And I think that there's an attorney equivalent of that too, making sure that the way that we're communicating about other areas of our case also resonate as deeply.
Okay, that is a great point. And I love how you mentioned you don't want to just kind of surround yourself by yes people, right? Like yes men. It's not a good idea. It's not going to lead to anything productive. Carly, what do you think is the secret to not getting stuck in that kind of echo box whenever you're building things? I know you've built a wine company. So tell me, how do you know who you want to surround yourself with?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I mean, I will just say, from putting the wine business aside, it is very useful for me having Dylan around. He is a sounding board for me at Steno. I will run something by him to see if, a message makes sense or not. And he's not afraid to tell me, no, that's not as compelling as it could be. And it will cause me to, restructure and reframe how I'm, going about presenting something. So I think I completely agree that we all need to get out of our box and, find people who can test us, even if I will run something by my husband also, who will tell me if my argument makes sense or not. I think it's wherever we are, it's important for us to get that sounding board. It makes us stronger lawyers. So I agree. We don't want to be in an echo chamber. Yeah, in terms of the wine business and who I want to start businesses with, again, it's people who compliment me and challenge me and force me to get out of my box and sometimes out of my way.
Love the way you phrase that. Getting out of your own way is really what's going to allow things to flourish. And Dylan, when it comes to accepting feedback, how do you go about that? Are you more like very receiving to it, or how does it work with your style of work?
It's probably a better question for Carly, how I accept feedback. We tend to give each other feedback, but listen, obviously I try to be as receptive as possible. I try to have no ego in everything I do. I try to do the best that I can in any given day, but obviously I can do better sometimes. And I try not to have any ego in terms of kind of the feedback that I get. And if people have that type of feedback for me, I'm always receptive. I may not want to hear it in the moment, but I try to kind of reflect upon it later and try to better myself, however that may be as a result of what that feedback is.
All right, love it. And Joe, I think now that we're coming up like around time here, I wanted to ask our classical question, and maybe we do it through an AWS lens. What would be your hot take around an attorney work style?
Oh man, we talk about this on the podcast all the time, right? But this is a question that I was so conflicted by when we first started asking it, and then the different kind of answers we've gotten. My hot take would be that I actually think that what we're seeing right now, especially with the way that tech is affecting the legal sector specifically, is that this level of access that we have to information now can accentuate some of these archetypes brilliantly. Access to case law. I mean, you've just never had more quickly verifiable. The ability to compile a bunch of documents or whatever it might be, pleadings, and sort of run them through AI and really use it as a sounding board for your own strategic thinking, things like that. I do think that there's just going to be a re-emphasis on what we were talking about earlier, these softer skills. I see it with my students. They have never before has a sort of class of law students have had this access to brilliance so readily available. And then the challenge becomes, okay, get on your feet and talk to opposing counsel or make a phone call. What is it like to talk to a judge, make an argument? How do you make a jury feel certain things? Those skills, I think they're really difficult to quantify, but it's one of those things that you know it when you hear it or you know it when you see it. And if you can make someone feel, if you can take all of these things, all of this information you have access to and make people feel, then I actually think that where we're going, that is the prize. That's going to be the gold. That's going to be one of the prized possessions, I think, of the future generations of lawyers across any of these archetypes.
That is a great hot take. And Dylan, love your thoughts on this. What do you think about what Joe said? Do you agree? Do you have another hot take? What do you think?
I agree. I'm not sure I have anything to add to that. That was such a great answer. Although I guess what I'd say is just in the context of this conversation, that, to the extent it's a hot take or not, I'm not really sure if it is, but there's probably just more than these 4 that we've identified, right? We focus on 4. There's probably, at least 10 different archetypes of lawyers that we can come up with. And so I think the point of this exercise, though, is really to be self-reflective in terms of trying to identify what type of person you are, and then try to identify what type of people you might work best with and complement your skills. I wouldn't feel necessarily constrained to live within these 4 that we've identified here, but it's a good starting point. And it's a good way to kind of start the conversation and get people thinking about who they work best with.
Love it. Great. And Carly, anything to add?
Not really. So I'll just shut up. I mean, I do think AI is changing a lot of this, both for the good and the bad. I think it's making a lot of the information more accessible and leveling the playing field for what Joe said, people having access. But it's also, as we've seen, making up some cases and in a way, weakening that. And so we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of, what the case law is while we're, telling the stories that matter. And really, it's who can think ahead, who can articulate what matters and go back to the fundamentals and, make sure we're actually citing good law. I think that's going to rule the day, but it's going to cause people to be more than just robots. I mean, the lawyers are going to have to really lawyer in the future. There's not going to be as much room for, I think, just
That's
paper pushers.
Great hot take. Lawyers are going to have to actually lawyer. We need to put that on a quote, stamp it, put on a sticker for the future. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me here today. Thank you to our audience for listening to this special episode. Be sure to take the quiz at steno.com/workstyles. Share your results, tag Steno, and of course, we will see you on the next one. See you soon.
Up next on Between the Briefs.
There's been a lot of innovation theater in legal where innovation titles were handed out, but firms weren't fully committed to innovating, especially at kind of a foundational level, until you've got buy-in at the top, which is now starting to happen because of AI has really forced their hand. Historically, tech has been viewed as an expense and they've really sought to minimize it. But now we're seeing that swing because they realize that we're in the midst of a huge transformation and they have to invest.
Stay tuned for the full interview coming to you soon.
Between the Briefs is brought to you by Steno. To find out more about Steno and how we combine exceptional court reporting and litigation support services to deliver a superior litigation experience, visit steno.com. That's STENO.com. And then make sure to search for Between the Briefs in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. And click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Steno, thanks for listening.